The Cosmic Nightmare Network features human horror films as training for other species. Galactic Safety Commissioner Al stared at the report on his desk with growing confusion. The tall, blue-skinned official had spent 30 years ensuring the safety of Council species across known space. He had dealt with reactor failures, plague outbreaks, and first contact disasters. But this made no sense. "Let me understand this correctly," he said to the junior analyst standing before him. "You're telling me that unauthorized access to human entertainment broadcasts has improved survival rates?" A young with iridescent chitin that shifted nervously, clicked her mandibles in affirmation. "Yes, Commissioner. Field operatives who consumed human horror films showed a 34% increase in survival during crisis scenarios. The correlation is undeniable." Al rubbed his forehead ridges. There were meticulous researchers, not given to wild theories. If S said the data was solid, it was solid. "Show me these films." 3 hours later, Al sat in a darkened viewing chamber with his security team. They had started watching something called Alien from Earth Year 1979. The viewing had been paused 17 times. "Rewind that section," demanded his head of security. The reptilian officer leaned forward. "Look at how the creature breached their perimeter. The crew member ignored biohazard protocols. They brought an unknown organism onto their ship without proper quarantine." "And here," added S, her antennae quivering with excitement, "watch how they split up. Multiple species have reported this exact tactical error in emergency situations. The humans show why this fails." Al watched the screen as the human crew members made decision after decision that seemed obvious in hindsight. Stay together. Trust your crew when they report threats. Maintain isolation protocols. Have a self-destruct option if contamination occurs. Each lesson was illustrated through the crew's failures, their terror, their deaths. "This is remarkable," he admitted. "The humans have created a perfect training simulation. The emotional engagement makes the lessons memorable. The scenarios are detailed and realistic." He paused. "Why would they share this with us? These are advanced military training materials." Scales rippled with uncertainty. "The broadcasts were not directed at us. We simply intercepted them. According to the metadata, humans create these for something called entertainment." "Entertainment," Al's voice rose. "They watch tactical survival simulations for fun." "That's what the data suggests, Commissioner." The room fell silent. Every species present knew what humans were. From a Category 9 planet, tough and adaptable, but generally friendly and soft-hearted. They cried at sad stories. They kept small animals as companions. They formed emotional bonds with anything that moved. The idea that they relaxed by watching survival horror seemed impossible. "We need a human expert," Al decided. Dr. Sarah arrived at Council headquarters 3 days later. The cultural was a small woman with dark hair and an easy smile. She sat across from Al in his office, completely unaware of why she'd been summoned. "Doctor, we need you to explain your species' tactical training programs," Al began. Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your horror films, the survival simulations. We've discovered they're remarkably effective training tools for emergency scenarios." Sarah's confusion deepened. "Horror films? You mean like scary movies?" "Yes, we've reviewed several. Alien, The Thing, Jaws. They contain invaluable survival lessons presented through immersive scenarios." Sarah started to laugh, then stopped when she saw Al's serious expression. "Commissioner, those are just movies, fiction, make-believe. People watch them to get scared on purpose." "But why?" "Because it's fun." Al's ridges furrowed deeper. "You watch survival scenarios where your own species dies in terrible ways for enjoyment." "Well, when you put it that way," Sarah trailed off. "Yes, I mean we know it's not real. It's like a roller coaster, safe danger." A roller coaster is a mechanical transport device designed to simulate life-threatening situations for pleasure, said from the corner. Your species is consistent, at least. Sarah rubbed her temples. Look, can you show me what you're talking about? They watched the thing together. Al's team took notes. Sarah ate popcorn, jumping at the scary parts out of habit. When it ended, the aliens turned to her expectantly. That was an excellent demonstration of shapeshifter protocols, S said. The blood test seen alone could save thousands of lives during infiltration scenarios. The importance of isolation and verification procedures, added. Not trusting anyone until they're confirmed uninfected. The value of destroying the entire facility rather than risk contamination spreading, Al finished. Sarah stared at them. It's just a monster movie. John Carpenter made it to scare people. Who is John Carpenter? Asked S. A director and artist, he makes films. So he's a military training developer. No, he makes horror movies, for theaters, for entertainment. The aliens exchanged glances. Al pulled up another report. Doctor, 3 months ago, a mining colony on 4 encountered an unknown organism. It had parasitic properties and could mimic other life forms. 3 workers survived by implementing what they called thing protocols. They isolated themselves, tested each other's blood, and maintained constant visual confirmation of identity. They had learned this from watching your film. Sarah's mouth opened and closed. I'm glad they survived, but... 2 weeks ago, a council ship responded to a derelict vessel, continued. The crew had been exposed to a hostile alien species. The rescue team, who had watched Alien, refused to allow survivors aboard without full biocontainment. They saved 47 lives by maintaining quarantine protocols they learned from your film. But those are just common-sense safety measures, Sarah protested. Not to most species, Al said quietly. Doctor, you must understand. Most council species evolved on gentler worlds. We developed civilization in environments that were challenging but not actively hostile. We create safety through consensus and cooperation. The idea of constantly preparing for worst-case scenarios is foreign to us. Humans imagine terrible things and prepare for them, S added. You create detailed scenarios of disaster and study them. This is not common. Sarah sat back in her chair, processing this. You're serious. You actually want to use horror movies as training materials. The data is clear, Al said. Species who have watched human horror films perform better in crisis situations. They think more tactically. They prepare better. They survive. This is insane. Perhaps, but it works. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm blared through the office. His communicator crackled to life. He listened, his scales paling to a lighter shade. Commissioner, we have a situation. Colony Theta 9 has gone silent. The last transmission mentioned something emerging from the planet's cave systems. Multiple casualties reported before communication ceased. Al stood immediately. Prepare a rescue mission. Sir hesitated. The 3 survivors who made it to the surface shelter are cadets. They sent a coded message. They say the situation matches something from the human archives. They referenced multiple films. The Descent, Aliens, and something called Tremors. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Cave systems, unknown predators, underground ambush hunters. You know this scenario? Al asked. It's a common horror movie setup, she admitted. Cave-dwelling monsters, isolated location, limited escape routes. She paused. The fact that those cadets recognized the pattern and survived this long means your films taught them what to do, Al finished. He looked at Sarah with new intensity. Doctor, I'm no longer asking. I need you to help us. Formally catalog these training materials. Help us understand how humans think about danger. Because right now, 3 are alive on that colony because they watched your scary movies. Sarah looked at the star map showing Colony Theta 9's location. She thought about three young aliens, probably terrified, hiding in the dark and remembering lessons from films meant to make audiences scream. Films made by humans who imagined monsters for fun. "All right," she said quietly, "I'll help, but I still think you're all crazy." "Perhaps we are," Al agreed, "but we're crazy enough to learn from the species that scares itself for practice." The rescue mission was being prepared. In the meantime, word was already spreading through Council diplomatic channels. The species that had dismissed humans as soft, emotional, were suddenly very interested in accessing what they now called the Human Survival Archives. Sarah, cultural, had just become humanity's most unlikely military consultant. And somewhere on a dying colony, three cadets huddled in the darkness, trying to remember every horror movie they'd ever watched. The conference room at Council headquarters was packed. Representatives from 43 species crowded around tables, their various forms of eyes fixed on the large screen at the front. Sarah stood beside the display, still not quite believing this was her job now. "This is the Human Hazard Simulation Program," she began, using the official name the Council had given her project. She still couldn't say it without mentally adding, "also known as scary movies." "Today we'll discuss threat categorization and appropriate species responses." On the screen, she pulled up her database. 6 weeks of work had gone into organizing Earth's horror films by threat type. The categories made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. "We have alien invasions, viral outbreaks, environmental collapse, artificial intelligence threats, supernatural entities, parasitic organisms, social breakdown, and—" She paused. "Things humans invented purely to scare themselves with no basis in known reality." A representative, whose gelatinous body rippled with concern, raised a tendril. "That last category disturbs us greatly. Why would humans imagine dangers that don't exist?" "Creativity," Sarah offered weakly. "Preparation for unknown unknowns." "Your species is deeply paranoid," observed Han, a vertex philosopher whose crystalline structure pulsed with calculating light. "Or deeply prepared," countered S, who had become Sarah's assistant. "The colony rescue succeeded because the cadets recognized threat patterns. All three survivors are alive." The news had spread fast. The rescue team, guided by protocols from 5 different horror films, had extracted the cadets without a single casualty. The creatures in the caves had been exactly the kind of ambush predators that human filmmakers loved. Stay in groups, maintain light sources, watch the walls and ceiling, and never investigate strange noises alone. Basic horror movie survival had translated to real-world success. "Let's begin with viral outbreak scenarios," Sarah continued. She pulled up a list that included 28 Days Later, Outbreak, The Andromeda Strain, and dozens more. These films teach rapid response, containment, and social distancing protocols. For the next hour, she walked them through scenarios. The aliens took notes. They asked questions. They were so earnest about it that Sarah had to keep reminding herself these were entertainment products being treated as military intelligence. The problem started when she introduced species-specific responses. The viewing of The Thing had to be stopped 20 minutes in. 3 representatives needed medical attention. Their species' entire culture was built on communal trust and physical merging. The idea of a shapeshifter that could imitate and replace individuals violated something fundamental in their psychology. "Perhaps they should skip infiltrator scenarios," Sarah suggested diplomatically, as medical staff helped the traumatized ambassadors from the room. They had the opposite problem. They were a hive-mind species, thousands of small creatures that functioned as one consciousness. When Sarah showed them Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the entire delegation went silent for 10 full minutes. "This is not a training film," they finally said. "This is a horror film." "Yes, that's what I've been saying." "No, you misunderstand. For you this is hypothetical fear. For us, this depicts our species' deepest existential terror, the loss of self, the replacement of individual thought. This is not entertainment. This is weaponized nightmare. Sarah made another note. Some scenarios were too close to species-specific fears, that were excused from body snatcher content. The vertex, however, surprised everyone. The logical, mathematical species became obsessed with Saw. This is remarkable, Han said, replaying the trap scenes for the 5th time. The scenario presents clear game theory problems. Each decision has calculable outcomes. The psychological pressure creates fascinating variables. It's torture porn, Sarah said bluntly. It's applied game theory under extreme conditions. We would like to study this extensively. Please don't. But they did. Within a week, Vertex research teams were creating their own logic puzzle survival scenarios based on the Saw franchise. The simulations were so psychologically damaging that 3 volunteer subjects required extended mental health treatment. The council banned all Vertex-created scenarios immediately. We were simply thinking like humans, Han protested at the emergency hearing. Humans make those movies for entertainment, not practice, Sarah argued. But humans can watch them for entertainment because you already think that way, Han countered. Your minds generate these scenarios naturally. You are comfortable with constant threat assessment. We are not. When we try to think like you, it breaks us. The hearing room went quiet. Sarah realized the Vertex had articulated something important and disturbing. Humans weren't special because they were brave or tough. They were special because they were constantly paranoid, and they'd evolved to handle it. The aquatic delphini had their own confusion. Sarah made the mistake of showing them Jaws. Why would humans voluntarily enter feeding zones? Asked Ambassador Krill, his gills fluttering with genuine puzzlement. The ocean, we like swimming. You know there are predators present, large ones, with impressive dentition. You have documented this extensively in this film, and yet you still enter the water. The ocean is big, shark attacks are rare. But not impossible. The film demonstrates this clearly. Why accept any risk? Because the ocean is nice. The Delphini delegation stared at her with their large, unblinking eyes. Humans are insane, Krill concluded. But we will study the film anyway. The predator behavior patterns are instructive. Despite the challenges, the program expanded rapidly. Sarah brought in a horror film director to help explain creative intent, had made 3 successful horror franchises, and was delighted to be taken seriously by aliens. So you're telling me that the scene where the creature stalks through the ventilation system is being taught at the equivalent of military academies across the galaxy? He asked during his first briefing. Multiple academies, S confirmed. It's now standard training for confined space operations. Looked like a child on Christmas morning. This is the greatest moment of my career. Please help us, Sarah begged. They don't understand these are fictional. Oh, I'm not helping with that. This is amazing. His input did prove valuable, though. He explained the mechanics of tension, packing, and scare tactics. The aliens learned that jump scares were meant to trigger adrenaline responses, that music and lighting were manipulation tools, that the monster was often a metaphor for something else. So the zombies in Night of the Living Dead represent societal collapse and humanity's tendency toward violence, asked a military instructor. Yes, but also they're scary dead people who eat you, explained. We will teach both interpretations. The results kept coming in. Cadets trained on human horror films outperformed traditionally trained operatives in 23 consecutive survival exercises. First contact teams who had studied alien invasion movies had better threat assessment protocols. Emergency responders who had watched disaster films had superior evacuation procedures. The methodology spread throughout council space. Emergency response centers stockpiled human films. Military academies created human threat assessment courses. Civilian safety programs included horror movie viewings. Sarah found herself in the bizarre position of writing academic papers on the tactical applications of slasher film survival rules and environmental hazard recognition through disaster cinema. Both were published in prestigious council journals. "I have a doctorate in cultural anthropology," she complained to S one evening. "I studied human-alien cultural exchange. Now I'm teaching aliens why you should never investigate the creepy noise in the basement." "You're saving lives," S pointed out. 17 documented cases this month alone where horror film training prevented casualties. "That's the insane part. It's working." Her communicator chimed. His urgent voice came through. "Doctor, we have a situation. The human exploration vessel Prometheus has gone dark near an uncharted planet. Council rescue teams are refusing to mount a mission." Sarah's blood went cold. Why? "They've reviewed the available data. The scenario matches multiple high-mortality films from your archives. The teams are citing what they call too many red flags. They're requesting human consultants to assess whether the scenario is survivable based on horror film precedent." Sarah ran for the command center. When she arrived, she found a room full of alien rescue coordinators reviewing data on a massive screen. They looked terrified. "Show me," she demanded. They did. The Prometheus had detected unusual readings from an ancient alien structure on an uninhabited planet. The crew had investigated despite multiple warning signs. Communications had become erratic, reporting impossible biological phenomena. The last transmission mentioned something about the crew changing. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She pulled up her database and ran a search. Multiple matches appeared. Prometheus, the film, ironically, Event Horizon, The Thing, Alien. Every single one ended badly. "This is a Class 5 nightmare scenario," declared a rescue coordinator. "Multiple horror film precedents predict total crew loss. Biological hazard, ancient alien technology, crew corruption, isolated location. We cannot send teams into this." "There are 40 humans on that ship," Sarah said quietly. "We understand, but the probability of successful rescue is less than 12% based on human film analytics. We cannot justify additional casualties." Before Sarah could respond, another alert came through. A message from a human ship, the indomitable commander speaking. "We've heard about the Prometheus situation. My crew is volunteering for rescue operations. We can be there in 6 hours." The room erupted in protests. The human volunteers were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Sarah suspected both. But as she watched the aliens frantically calculate survival probabilities using horror movie databases, she realized something important. The aliens had learned the lessons from horror films. They'd learned to recognize danger, assess threats, and know when to retreat. They'd learned fear. Humans had already mastered it. Commander was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and the calm expression of someone who had seen too much to be easily rattled. She stood in the Council Command Center, reviewing the Prometheus data with the practiced eye of a 30-year veteran. Ancient alien structure, check. Mysterious biological phenomena, check. Crew acting strange, check. She looked up at the assembled aliens. "Yeah, this is bad." "Yet you volunteered anyway," Al said. He couldn't decide if he was witnessing bravery or madness. "Someone has to, they're our people." Pulled up the relevant horror films on her. "Let's see. We've got elements of Prometheus, obviously, some Event Horizon, possible thing scenario, maybe a touch of Alien if we're really unlucky." Sarah stared at her fellow human. "You're using scary movies to plan a rescue mission. Your training program, right? Seems useful." Zoomed in on the alien structure. "The building itself is the threat vector. We don't go inside. We extract survivors from the ship only, set up a perimeter. Anyone showing signs of infection or alteration gets quarantined immediately. We prepare a contamination protocol with full ship sterilization options. You're planning to possibly destroy a human exploration vessel, said. If it's compromised beyond recovery, yes, better than letting whatever's on there spread. Said it with the casual tone of someone ordering lunch. Haven't you watched horror movies? The ship becomes the threat. We don't save the ship. We save the people, maybe, if they're still people. The alien rescue coordinators looked at each other. This was exactly what the horror films taught, but hearing a human say it so calmly was different. I'm coming with you, Sarah announced. No, you're not. You're civilian support. I wrote the horror movie survival guide everyone's been using. I'm coming. Studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Fine. Don't investigate any creepy noises. Don't split off from the group. Don't touch anything that looks weird. Basic rules. I know the rules. I taught the rules. 6 hours later, the Indomitable approached the Prometheus. The human rescue vessel carried a crew of 20 experienced operators and 3 alien observers who insisted on documenting human crisis response. Was among them, her chitinous body sealed in a specialized suit. The Prometheus floated dead in space, dark except for emergency lighting. The alien structure on the planet below pulsed with strange energy. Sarah felt her skin crawl just looking at it. Right, said to her team. This is a horror movie scenario. We treat it like one. 3-person minimum teams, constant communication, nobody goes anywhere alone. We're looking for survivors in the habitable sections only. We see anything that doesn't look right, we pull back immediately. Questions. What if the crew members don't want to evacuate? Asked one of the rescuers. Then they're definitely compromised. Sedate and extract. Anyone refusing rescue gets treated as a hostile until proven otherwise. The team moved through the Prometheus with military precision. Sarah stayed close to, fighting the urge to jump at every shadow. The ship was a mess. Equipment torn apart. Biological matter on the walls that probably wasn't supposed to be there. And writing. Someone had written messages in multiple languages. Don't listen. It lies. They're not who they say they are. This is bad, Sarah whispered. Could be worse, replied. At least the lights still work. They found the first survivor in the medical bay. A young woman, huddled in a corner, holding a plasma cutter like a weapon. Her eyes were wild. Stay back, she screamed. It's okay, said calmly. We're rescue, we're getting you out. You can't trust anyone. They look normal, but they're not. It gets inside you, changes you. Sarah and exchanged glances. That was pure horror movie dialogue. The question was whether it was trauma-induced paranoia or accurate threat assessment. What's your name? Asked. Dr. Lisa. I'm Commander. That's Dr. Sarah, no relation, I assume. We're taking you home. You have to burn the ship, destroy it. We brought something back. We thought it was inactive, but it wasn't. It's in the ventilation now. It's in everything. Didn't hesitate. She tapped her communicator. To Indomitable, prep for contamination scenario alpha. All extracted personnel to be isolated and scanned. Authorization to destroy Prometheus if necessary. The response was immediate. Confirmed, Commander. Lisa stared at her. You believe me? Horror movie rule number 1. Believe the survivor who sounds crazy. They usually know what's happening. They found 3 more crew members. All showed signs of exposure to something. 2 were unconscious. 1 was speaking in a language that wasn't human. All were immediately sedated and sealed in isolation pods. The alien structure below pulsed brighter. We need to leave, S said urgently. That energy signature is increasing. Whatever it's doing, it's accelerating. How many crew members are still missing? Sarah asked. 36 unaccounted for, replied. The ship's speakers crackled to life. A voice spoke, but it wasn't quite right. The tone shifted between octaves unnaturally. "Thank you for coming. We need rescue. We're in the cargo bay. Please hurry." Every human on the rescue team froze. "That's not human," Sarah said. "No," agreed, "it's not." The alien observers looked confused. "How do you know?" S asked. "Because no human would say we need rescue in that situation. We'd say help us, or get us out, or scream. That's how something trying to sound human would phrase it." Sarah felt cold. That was a horror movie trick, the monster mimicking human speech but getting it slightly wrong. She'd seen it a dozen times. She'd never expected to encounter it in reality. "New plan," announced. "We leave. Now, we don't search the cargo bay, we don't investigate, we take who we have and we go." "But the others," one of the rescue team started, "are gone or compromised. We don't have time to debate this." They moved quickly back to their shuttle. Behind them, the Prometheus began making sounds, groaning metal, something large moving through corridors, voices calling out for help in perfect, too perfect human tones. "Don't listen," ordered, "keep moving." Sarah saw movement in the shadows, something that might have been crew members once. They moved wrong, joints bending in directions that shouldn't work. When they called out, their mouths didn't quite sync with the words. The rescue team made it to the shuttle. As they pulled away, gave the order. "Indomitable, fire on the Prometheus. Destroy it completely." "Commander, there may still be survivors." "There are things that used to be our crew. Fire." The council observers watched as the human ship destroyed the Prometheus without hesitation. The explosion was thorough. Nothing remained but debris. "You killed your own people," Han said quietly. "We killed what they'd become," corrected. "Better a clean death than whatever that was." Back at council headquarters, the debriefing lasted 6 hours. The 4 survivors from the Prometheus remained in isolation. They seemed physically fine, but all reported psychological trauma. Lisa provided the clearest account. "We found biological material in the structure, ancient but preserved. It was designed to convert other life forms, use them as hosts or raw material. By the time we realized what was happening, half the crew was already compromised. They still looked like us, talked like us, but they weren't us anymore." "Why didn't you evacuate immediately?" Al asked. "We tried. The captain thought we could contain it, that we could save everyone." Lisa's voice broke. "We should have watched more horror movies." The statement hung in the air. Everyone present understood the dark irony. Al called an emergency council session. Sarah found herself presenting to the entire assembly, with beside her. "We need to discuss a concerning realization," Al began. "The human rescue team successfully extracted survivors from a nightmare scenario. They made difficult decisions rapidly. They recognized threats that our trained observers missed. And most importantly, they seemed almost comfortable with the situation." "We weren't comfortable," said. "We were terrified." "Yet you functioned efficiently." "Because we've imagined scenarios like this 1,000 times. Every human has. We tell ghost stories as children. We watch horror movies as teenagers. We read thrillers as adults. We're constantly exposing ourselves to fictional worst-case scenarios." An elderly scholar, Ra, stood to speak. Her chitin had dulled with age, but her voice was strong. "I have studied the human training materials extensively. I've also studied human psychology, history, and culture. The council has made an error in understanding." The assembly quieted. "We assumed humans created horror films as training materials, but that's backwards. Humans don't create horror films to prepare for disasters. They create horror films because they're already preparing for disasters. Constantly. Every human mind runs threat assessment scenarios continuously." Ra pulled up imagery of Earth. The beautiful, deadly planet rotated on screen. Humans evolved on a world with apex predators, diseases, weather extremes, geological instability, and countless ways to die. Their ancestors survived by always asking, "What's the worst that could happen?" They imagined monsters in every shadow because there were monsters in shadows. They prepared for disasters because disasters were common. "We know humans are," someone said. "You know it intellectually, but you haven't internalized what it means. Most species develop safety through cooperation and environmental control. Humans develop safety through paranoia. They survived by imagining threats before they appeared, by planning for worst-case scenarios, by telling stories about dangers real and imagined." Ra gestured to Sarah, and horror films aren't training materials. They're a window into how human minds work all the time. Every human is constantly running a background process asking, "What if something goes wrong?" They call it anxiety. They see it as a flaw, but it's actually their greatest survival advantage. The assembly absorbed this. Sarah felt uncomfortably exposed, like someone had explained her entire species in a way she'd never quite articulated. "So what do we do with this information?" Al asked. "We integrate it properly," Ra replied. "The human hazard simulation program continues, but we teach not just the scenarios but the mindset, constructive paranoia, constant what-if thinking, the ability to imagine danger before it arrives." Over the following months, the program evolved. Horror films remained part of the curriculum, but now with proper context. Sarah developed courses on human threat assessment psychology, trained teams in rapid crisis decision-making, taught the art of scenario imagination. The results were remarkable. Council species began thinking more proactively about safety. Emergency protocols improved. First contact procedures became more robust, and slowly other species started to understand what it meant to be human. One evening, Sarah found Al watching The Exorcist with his daughter. The young female was taking careful notes. "Advanced psychological threat assessment," Sarah guessed. "She wants to be a diplomat," Al explained. "Understanding human perspective seems valuable." "And you're okay with her watching this?" "It's educational, though I admit the head rotation scene was disturbing." Sarah smiled. She'd given up trying to explain that these were just entertainment. If the galaxy wanted to treat them as survival guides, fine. It was working. "Commissioner, can I ask you something? What made you really accept the program?" Al was quiet for a moment. When Commander made the decision to destroy the Prometheus, she didn't hesitate. She didn't form a committee. She didn't debate. She recognized the scenario, calculated the risks, and acted. That's what humans do. You see the danger and move. "We've had a lot of practice imagining dangers." "Yes, and that's what makes you simultaneously the most paranoid and most prepared species in the galaxy." He turned back to the screen. "Though I still maintain that your willingness to scare yourselves for entertainment is deeply concerning." Sarah laughed. She pulled up her messages and found one from now running horror movie-based tactical training at 3 council military academies. The message was short. "They actually listen now. Turns out surviving the Prometheus made us credible. Who knew?" Earth's horror film industry had become an unlikely diplomatic asset. Humanity's reputation across the galaxy had shifted. They were no longer seen as just tough. They were the species that scared themselves for practice, that imagined nightmares to prepare for reality, that turned their own paranoia into entertainment and then survival. Somewhere on Earth, a horror film director was writing a script about ancient alien structures that corrupted human crews. He had no idea it had already happened. He was just imagining worst-case scenarios for fun, the way humans always had. And across the galaxy, aliens watched and learned, trying to think like humans, trying to imagine dangers before they arrived, trying to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. It was exhausting, but as more species survived situations they wouldn't have before, they began to understand. Humans weren't brave despite being paranoid. They were brave because they were paranoid. They'd imagined the nightmare scenarios so many times that facing them in reality was almost familiar. Sarah, formerly a cultural and now the galaxy's foremost expert on horror film tactical applications, sat in her office and wondered what her anthropology professors would think. She was teaching aliens to be afraid, and somehow that was making them safer. Her communicator chimed. Another situation, another crisis, another chance to ask, what would the humans in a horror movie do wrong? And then they'd do the opposite. It was, she had to admit, a pretty good system.